Are faint of heart. I'm just going to warn you, they are pretty graphic. I saved the worst ones for a different crowd, but these are some pictures that might shock you a little bit, but this is something that really happened to me. So this is why I show it, because it's important for us to talk about. Okay, so when I was 20 years old, which was 7 years ago now, oh, I'm getting old, I was invited to go, I'm sorry, invited to go on a ride on the back of a GSXR 750 with a guy who I had met 2 days earlier. And I had been riding as a passenger my entire life. Ever since I was 7, my very first ride was with my cousin Chad on the back of his Honda Hurricane. And I wasn't wearing any gear for that ride. So subsequently, all the rest of the rides that I had taken as a passenger for the rest of my life usually were pretty gearless. Maybe a helmet, most of the time nothing whatsoever. My parents didn't raise me as a rider. They weren't riders themselves. They rode Harleys with some of their friends sometimes, but they never owned a motorcycle. I never got the lecture from my parents. I didn't grow up as somebody who wanted to become a rider because of my family. I wanted to become a rider because it was the cool thing to do. So in high school, I was watching all the new shows that were coming out on TV, one of them being Monster Garage with Jesse James. And everyone does remember what Jesse wears when he does his demo rides on his bikes, and that would include sometimes a tank top and a beanie helmet with a spike up the middle of it. So needless to say, I didn't have a whole lot of influence in my life as far as gear went. So when I went on this ride, when I was 20, with this guy who I had only known for 2 days, I asked if I could borrow a helmet, because we were going to be riding the canyons in New Mexico, which is where I grew up. And his friend said, sure, I have a helmet that you can borrow. I normally wear a size extra small to small, and the helmet that he gave me was a 2XL. It didn't fit very well, but I didn't care or know the difference. And so I put the $50 2XL G-Max helmet on, and away we went down the canyons of the Jemez Mountains in New Mexico. Sean's friends took off after a right-hand corner down the straightaway, and at about 120 miles an hour, Sean decided he wanted to catch up to them. So without any warning, besides the instructions that he had given me before the ride started, which was, put your hands on the gas tank, in case I have to stop quickly, you won't push me into the gas tank, he took off. And I mean, Gixxer 750 took off. And it knocked my head back as the crosswinds through the canyons came, and popped that helmet visor open on that helmet that was 4 sizes too big for me, and the helmet tried to drag me off the back of the bike. Well, what I didn't have anything to hang on to, because Sean was wearing a t-shirt, which was the influence that I had from him and all of his friends as well, I went off the back of the motorcycle at 120 miles an hour. And what else was I wearing besides that borrowed helmet? A long sleeve sweatshirt, hoodie sweatshirt, a pair of capri jeans, and a pair of Nike tennis shoes. And underneath that I had a bikini. Don't ask why. We were just, you know, silly kids at that point. But yeah, that's all I was wearing. So the police that did the reconstruction of my fall said that I went 522 feet down the freeway in a sweatshirt, jeans, and Nike tennis shoes, and that borrowed helmet. So, needless to say, I skinned myself alive that day. I had 50% body coverage of third-degree road rash, and various other injuries that would end up changing my life forever. I ripped both of my kneecaps off. I tore the rotator cuff in my right shoulder. I herniated a disc in my lower back between L4 and L5. I dislocated my right big toe all the way down to the part where the toe basically would have come off if I didn't have skin on my foot. And I also basically ripped off my left pinky finger, tore all the tendons, ground down some of the bones. Everything was kind of mushy in there. But besides that, I didn't have any broken bones, so I was really lucky that my tumble was a tumble and a slide. The rest of my internal organs were okay, and I didn't have any injuries to my spinal cord, which who knows how that happened. I was actually training, I was in the Marine Corps delayed enlistment program at the time, So the doctor said that the reason I didn't lose my limbs was because I had such great muscle tone from all the workouts that I had been doing. So the doctors actually said I probably would have lost one or both arms, or actually shouldn't even be here. Like, I should not be standing here in front of you telling this story. So the reason why I do tell this story isn't to scare everybody away from motorcycling, because as you know, as you saw, I rode here. I love motorcycling just as much as everybody else who loves motorcycling, and I want to do it for the rest of my life. So, at the end of the day, this isn't a cautionary tale to keep you from doing something that you love. On the contrary, it's to keep you doing something that you love for the rest of your life. So, I'm going to show you some pictures. If the story itself hasn't lent itself a little bit of a benefit, this is what I looked like 2.5 months after getting out, or after the crash. So I had been out of the hospital for 3 days when I took this picture in my bedroom, or these two pictures in my bedroom. So you can see that there's still open wounds 2.5 months later, and my skin wasn't going to grow back on its own. So everybody thinks about, well, okay, when you crash and you get some injuries, it hurts for a little while and then you're back on your feet. But 2.5 months later, I could barely stand on my own, and I had to learn how to walk and write my name and talk and brush my hair and my teeth all over again. And when I was 20 years old, that's not a decision that I thought that I was making that day when I got on the back of that motorcycle. Medical technology is the only reason why I was able to get out of the hospital so quickly. And quickly, 2.5 months, people don't consider that quickly. A lot of people tell me that the reason why they don't want to wear all their gear when they ride is because they have a right to that freedom. They want to feel the freedom of the wind blowing through their hair or the sun on their skin. And I will tell you that I might not know exactly what freedom is, but I know what freedom isn't. And it's being strapped down to a hospital bed for 3 weeks because you're not allowed to move because your skin isn't even in place anymore. And that's what I had to go through. So the hospital stay was the worst part of everything. I got really sick in the hospital. If anyone has ever spent any extended period of time in the hospital, even a couple of days, it's really easy to get sick in the hospital. So I got pneumonia, I had Pseudomonas infection in my wounds, I had staph infection in my blood, yeast infections under my arms from where they had strapped me down, and it started to eat away at my skin, so there's 2 different kinds of burns on my body at that point. Some other things that happened as a result of the accident: a blood clot in my left leg from the back of my knee all the way up to my groin. Almost every single muscle in my body atrophied because I didn't use them for 2 months. So I had to go through 6 months of physical therapy after this picture was taken. Then I got out of the hospital and everything seemed to be on the up and up, and I was, becoming a normal person again. And then all my hair fell out, just like I had been in chemotherapy, because all of the surgeries, all 9 surgeries that I had to go through, 3 of them being surgical debridement. Everyone's heard of that wire brush, right? And you get road rash. Well, I didn't get the wire brush. I got a scalpel, and I got it 3 times for 3 hours at a time in surgery before they could even skin graft me. So then the rest of the surgeries, the other 6 were all skin graft surgeries. And the only place that they could take the skin from on my body was my thighs, because that was the only place that wasn't affected by road rash. So there wasn't enough to do all the skin grafts all at the same time. So they took the skin off my legs and grafted half of my body, and then I waited a month and a half for the skin to grow back on my legs thick enough so that they could cut it off again and put it on the rest of my wounds that stayed open for a month and a half. So you can imagine if you've ever had a strawberry on your knee, multiply that by 1,000,000 times. I can't even begin to describe the pain to you. And then lean on it for a month and a half while you wait for another strawberry on your leg to heal so then you can make it a strawberry again. It's something that I can't really describe, but I hit rock bottom in the hospital that day at 20 years old, and that's not a decision that I thought that I was making. Some long-term consequences. Here's what I'm going to look like for the rest of my life. Those are the skin graft scars on the left side of my body. I lost half to 3/4 of my left breast. So that's actually, a pretty graphic close-up picture of what it looks like. That's not something that's ever going to go away, and people will notice something like that for the rest of my life. So now, again, I have an obligation to tell my story simply because people notice it, right? Other long-term consequences that I didn't consider, of course, when I was getting on the back of that motorcycle, I might not ever be able to have children. So not making my parents grandparents isn't really something that a 20-year-old girl signs up for. It's not something that you think of when you think of long-term consequences of going on a nice fun canyon ride on the back of a bike without any gear on. PTSD, I had that. I'll have that for the rest of my life. Sometimes I'll have a trigger that'll put me into a panic attack. Most of them, you know, are short-lived now. I don't have them very often, but that's something that I can't control or fix or get rid of. Some other long-term consequences, I'm 27 and I have arthritis in both of my knees after ripping them both off and then getting them surgically replaced. Getting out of bed in the morning hurts, and standing here hurts. And the job that I do, which I'll talk about in just a minute, is painful. Every second of what I do for a living is painful, but I love to do what I do because it helps people. Part of it is standing here in front of you guys and telling my story and telling the whole world why it's so important for us to talk about this kind of stuff. Not just because it happened to me, but because it can happen to anybody at any time. We're all riders and we're all at risk for these kinds of injuries every time we get on the bike. Yes, my story is an extreme version, but I think it's an extreme version for a reason. So very often we lose people in accidents and they don't get to tell their stories. They don't get to tell us whether they think they made a good decision or if they would change something or what it was like before they left us. So I feel like I'm the voice for those people. I am the voice, perhaps, for the ones who don't get to tell their stories. Okay, so why did this happen? I like to say that I was educated as much as the bike-curious American. So I told you before that I was watching Jesse James on TV and no one had ever really given me the gear spiel. I took driver's ed when I was 14 years old, and to this day, I stay out of the no zone around semis, because I remember they put us inside a semi and said, the rest of the class is going to stand around the semi, and we're going to see how many of them you can see. And that stuck with me will stick with me for the rest of my life. So I still make sure that I'm cautious on the road when I'm driving my car, and now, of course, my motorcycle. But in driver's ed, they never talked to us about motorcycles, looking out for them, or if we were ever going to be on a motorcycle, what the right choices to make are. So my education, and most of Americans' education, is what they see other riders doing and what they see on TV. If you guys notice, watch commercials, movies, whatever, most of the time the good guys are wearing either no gear at all, or open face helmets where you can see them smiling, and light colored, flannel shirts, maybe a leather jacket that's white or something. We're thinking of Flo from the Progressive commercials now, on her helmet hair commercial. But, James Bond types movies, the action figure jumps on the motorcycle and does some crazy awesome stuff because, of course, he doesn't have gear lying around, but he's the good guy. What are the bad guys wearing?
Gear.
Black leather, black helmet.
Black leather, black helmet, full face. You can't see them, right?
Can't see them.
What are all the people in the commercials who are stealing stuff wearing? Okay? Full leathers, full face helmet, you can't see their faces, right? So, inherently, we're taught from a very young age that wearing all of your gear isn't a good thing, or it's an evil thing, or makes you a bad person. And if you're a good guy, then nothing, A, is ever going to happen to you, and B, what you wear is the light-colored, light, fabric, open-face helmet. And then, of course, the celebrity examples that I was talking about before. We can think of Orange County Choppers as another one. I love the motorcycle industry, and I think everyone has the right to choose what they wear, but this is the education that we're getting on TV. So I made a choice to wear my gear because I thought my helmet was my gear. That was all everyone ever talks about when it comes to helmet laws or gear laws, is whether or not the government should tell us that we can wear a helmet. No one ever talks about jacket laws or glove laws or pant laws or boot laws. And unless you're in the military, no one ever tells you that you have to wear anything like that beyond a helmet. So we don't talk about it. It's not even considered as part of gear if you aren't educated by, say, your training or information that's been passed down from generation to generation. And then choosing the proper gear to prevent the consequences that I suffered was beyond common sense, simply because how many people throw a leg over their motorcycle and think of all of the long-term consequences that could possibly happen to them? Because we don't want to think about that. That doesn't make us happy. We want to think about going for a nice ride and getting off the bike at the end of the day in one piece. But if we don't talk about it every once in a while, if we don't think about it, if we don't spread the word about the consequences and it never crosses our minds, then we're not going to make decisions based on those types of consequences. That's why I do what I do.